All right. Thanks everybody for being here tonight. My name is Leah Holloway. I am the program manager with Milwaukee Riverkeeper and one of the lead organizers for the Plastic Free MKE Coalition. We're excited to have you all here tonight for our plastics panel on the Great Lakes. I'm just going to dive right in with some background information on Plastic Free MKE for those of you who are new to us. And then we will turn it over to our researchers and friends over at the School of Freshwater Sciences. We are Plastic Free MKE. We began in 2018. We were started by a group of really passionate volunteers who are concerned about, how much plastic there is in our environment and in our lives, and the state of global plastics recycling, which is not ideal. So we really quickly learned that the problem is larger than plastics not being recycled. It's really like a whole systemic issue where it's getting into our daily lives in ways that we have very little control over. So Milwaukee Riverkeeper joined the movement and worked to help form the coalition, and we also help support the volunteer initiatives that are still continuing today. So our mission and vision, our mission is to reduce the harms that unnecessary plastics have on environmental health, public health, and social justice, and we center those most harmed by plastics. We're working to build a community around plastics alternatives, advocating for producer and polluter accountability. Right now, it's on the individuals to make the changes, and we believe that should change. And we're also working to use collaborative problem solving to eliminate plastics in the Milwaukee area. Again, it's a whole big systemic problem, and we all kind of need to be working together and tackling the issue from different angles. And we really envision just Milwaukee being healthier for everyone with less plastic. So that's kind of the vision that we're working towards. I mentioned our coalition. So our coalition members are other nonprofits like Milwaukee Riverkeeper. You'll see some of them on the screen here. Government entities, for-profit businesses, groups, other organizations, and these are the folks that are all kind of working on the back end to work on some of those systemic changes through education, policy initiatives, working to support our Lake Friendly program, which you'll hear more about in a second. So these are the groups that are kind of working on the bigger picture back end side of plastics. And then we also have a lot of volunteer initiatives. And so these are the boots on the ground in the community, actions that are happening. They're being led and supported by our volunteers. So we do grocery store educational initiatives. We'll go to places like Pick and Save and wear a plastic bag monster costume, which is what's in the photo here. We'll talk to customers as they're walking into or out of a store about plastic bag usage in the Milwaukee area. We help support zero or low waste events in Milwaukee. We're working with both the city and the county on changing purchasing protocol and policies to reduce plastics. It's really great to see when our local governments step up and do the right thing, then it makes it easier for other groups to follow suit. We run water refill stations at community events, so providing clean, healthy drinking water at events, especially throughout the summer when it's really hot outside. So our water, we use aluminum water bottles and large 5-gallon jugs so that we're reducing the need for single-use plastic water bottles at these events. We have our Lake Friendly program, which I mentioned earlier. So this is a program where volunteers and coalition partners go to their favorite restaurants and say, hey, can I help you work through some of the materials you're using and producing and giving to your customers? Can we reduce plastic on your level? And we have about 30 businesses that have really committed to reducing their plastic consumption, both back of house, what they're using internally, and also what they're passing on to their customers. And we're starting to see some really good momentum and growth there, which is exciting. We do a lot of community outreach and education. We're working on a citywide reusable container system. So hopefully within the next 2 to 5 years, when you go to your favorite business, or maybe even like Pfizer Forum or American Family Field, you'll get your meal in a to-go container that you can bring back, and it will get washed and it will get reused dozens, if not hundreds of times before it's thrown away. So working on systems like that here in Milwaukee. So why do we care so much about plastics? Well, it's impacting our health. Plastics like styrofoam can leach toxins into our foods and beverages. And there's a lot of research that's needed on the health impacts of plastic, Microplastics are those teeny tiny little pieces of plastic that either are caused when plastic breaks down in the environment, or most of our clothes are made out of plastic. And so fibers and things like that are producing like little microfibers that are getting into our air, our water, our food, and all of those things are having an impact on our health. And we don't fully understand what that impact is yet, but we know that humans are ingesting about a credit card worth of plastic every week. And if you think about it, single-use plastics are often only used for about 10 minutes, like those plastic bags we talked about earlier. They're used for about 10 minutes, but they're going to be in our environment and impacting our health forever. So that's one reason why we focus on plastics. Plastics are also impacting our lakes, rivers, and oceans. So they're the most prevalent litter in our waterways. Tobacco products and food packaging are the most common types of plastic found. But 85% of fish from the Milwaukee River were found to contain plastic in their digestive tracts. 22 million pounds of plastic enter the Great Lakes every year. About 11 million pounds of that is going into Lake Michigan, just based on where our population centers are and how the rivers are carrying plastic into our Great Lakes. So there's a lot of damage to our waterways as well. And finally, plastics are really damaging to our planet. So within the next decade, plastics will be a bigger driver of climate change than coal extraction and burning, which is a huge deal. And that will continue to grow, especially as we're shifting away from fossil fuels for energy, and we're shifting to more renewable energy sources. The fossil fuel industry, because plastics are made from fossil fuels, the industry is looking to plastics to be their next source of revenue. So that will continue to increase as we get further away from non-renewable sources of energy. Those companies are going to look more and more to plastics in the future. So that's just a really brief overview of plastic-free MKE, who we are and what we do and why we care about plastics. There's a lot of different ways to join us. So if you're not already on our newsletter, hopefully you'll join us and come be a part of our coalition, our movement. So a little introduction to what we're talking about today. Way back in 2021, in February of 2021, Elizabeth Sutton, the outreach program manager for the School of Freshwater Sciences, gave us a really fabulous overview of the Great Lakes, how they work, why they're so unique and precious to us, how we depend on them. A really, really great overview of the Great Lakes. She also talked about the critical research happening at the School of Freshwater Sciences. SFS is the only freshwater focused graduate program in the world. So it's really unique stuff happening here. We're really lucky to have this resource in our community. She also talked about how plastics are showing up in the Great Lakes. So we had a really great discussion following Liz's presentation. And one of the things that you all, our members, our participants, asked for was more information on the specific research being done at SFS on plastics. Plastics in the Great Lakes. So here we are 2 years later. we're finally getting this conversation really going. We're really excited to have our researchers here with us today to share more about the specific things that they're working on. So at this point, I'm going to turn things over to Liz. She's going to give us a really quick overview of SFS again, for those of you who maybe didn't join us 2 years ago, or that was 2 years ago. So, it's been a minute. I'm also going to drop a link to the recording of that presentation into the chat if you did want to go back and watch it. It was really, really incredible. So I'm going to turn it over to Liz. She's going to talk about SFS and the work that they're doing really quickly, and then she's going to introduce our panelists for the evening. We'll get a chance to hear about their research, ask some really great questions, and then we'll kind of have we'll dive into some broader questions about plastics in the Great Lakes moving forward from there. So I'm going to stop sharing and I will turn it over to you, Liz.
Thank you, Leah. What a great introduction. And yeah, we're very excited. I always really like it when I can come in and do a bit of introduction, and then we can get to our researchers who are doing the work every day. So this is a great setup and I appreciate that. I'm going to, like Leah said, I'm just going to go through some basics about the school and a little information. She did slightly get us wrong. We are not the only school dedicated to freshwater sciences in the world. but we are the only ones in the United States. So we're the only standalone school dedicated to freshwater. So what we're going to just go through briefly is that background of the School of Freshwater Sciences again. We are an oceanographic style research institute located right in Milwaukee's harbor. So if you look at this building down to the bottom right of your picture, that's us. We are also the largest academic research facility at our institute on the Great Lakes. So we're doing a lot of work on that regularly. We have been doing work primarily as a research unit first, and that was in the 60s. We started doing that work as a research unit, and we've been doing that work all along and very heavily focused on research. But then in 2009 is when we became the School of Freshwater Sciences, and we added in the degree program. Before that, students were working in all of our labs, but now they are able to get their degree directly from us. And we have a fair amount of academic programs where we're training the next generation of scientists and professionals. We have a new bachelor's program at the School of Freshwater Sciences where you can get that freshwater science degree. So we have bachelor's, master's, and PhD. We're also the home for atmospheric sciences for UWM. And they have bachelor's, master's, and PhD students as well. So we have approximately 100 students across all of those programs, and they are actively out and working throughout, whether it may be in Washington, D.C. or in local organizations. And this is where I always like to bug Leah, because Leah is one of our graduates. So she's part of that better than 95% job placement that we have for after graduation. So they're out, they are working in a variety of places throughout the community at large. But then, like I said, we have this big focus on research. And that research is in 5 areas: human and ecosystem health. So what are, and kind of a lot of the stuff that Plastics Free has been talking about, what are the impacts of different contaminants and stuff in our ecosystem on our health? But then what are some of the things that we do that are impacting the ecosystem and the health of the organisms that are living there as well? So a lot of things, like you can see stuff like pharmaceuticals or bad bacteria and microbes and toxic algae and that type of thing. We have an area of freshwater system dynamics. That's what you would normally think that we do, and we're best known for. Really looking at those large systems, not only the Great Lakes, but we study large freshwater systems around the world. And that can be anything from the organisms there. We've had large mapping projects, restoration activities. So it's really looking at, how is the system functioning, and sometimes in what do we need to do to manage that system. We do a lot of work with water technology. And some of those things are instrumentation and how we may do scientific instruments or help create new ones, apply scientific instrument or equipment in different ways, work with a lot of engineers and chemists, or what one of the people we'll be hearing from today we do a lot of work with like aquaculture and fish diet production and those type of technologies as well. We are the home for the Center of Water Policy for the state of Wisconsin. And that's really bringing in all of the knowledge and scientific expertise that we've had throughout our history, and putting in that kind of human and economic element. So looking at how do we really value our water resources? Can we put a cost on the importance of maintaining those water resources and using activities that we do along the coast, that type of thing? What's really that kind of economics and the social science aspects of a lot of our work? And then our fifth area of research is in weather, climate, and watersheds, and that really stems from the atmospheric sciences department joining with us. There's a lot of work that we've been doing looking at lake levels, at flooding, and how that can play a role in infrastructure and sewer overflow. A lot of impacts looking at climate change. And if any of you are ever listening to like WUWM or those types of things, innovative weather is a big part of that program. And so if you ever hear them, that's being broadcast from our building. So that's a really quick overview of a lot of the work that we do. We are a small school in many ways, but we also have a lot of stuff going on. And so that's why it's wonderful that we are able to bring back, or that you asked us to come back so that we can share a lot of the specific work that we are doing in plastics. And I'm going to stop sharing so that we can kind of get ready. And I will would like to introduce Fang Deng. And Dr. Deng is a senior scientist for the School of Freshwater Sciences. She earned her Bachelor of Science in Zoology and Master of Science in Aquaculture Nutrition at Sun Yat-sen University in Guangdong Province in China. And I apologize, Dongfang, if I really messed up the pronunciation. She earned her Doctor of Philosophy in Nutrition and Master of Science in Animal Science from the University of California, Davis. Her expertise is in aquaculture. She's a nutritionist studying better fish feeds to support the aquaculture industry and conservation efforts. Dr. Deng works with students ranging from high school interns to international postgraduates. Her dynamic team learns from one another as they tend to many species of fish, including yellow perch, rainbow trout, Atlantic salmon, tilapia, and lake sturgeon at times, working in our extensive aquaculture lab. And a lot of that is focused on the nutrition for fish and how to best provide that nutrition through an aquaculture program. So I'm going to leave it to you, Dr. Deng, so that you can tell us a little more about your work.
Thank you, Liz, for the introduction. And it's my pleasure to have this opportunity to share some of the research with you related to microplastics. So before I start that, I know Liz have very good introduction on our school, and I also like to spend a few minutes to share with you about my program here, what we do beside the nutrition of microplastic studies. So in my lab, so everything we do is related to fish, and the major thing is nutrition. What we want to see is how we should feed the fish, what we should feed them, and which kind of method we should feed them to keep them alive, of course, keep them have a better growth and healthy. So the purpose, number one, is to support fish farming, so for seafood production. And then number two, also try to develop technology to support the conservation of fisheries. So beside that, we also like to use fish as a model to study some environmental issue like microplastics, one of the topic we are doing now. And so we also have extension research and engage with our public and the community to educate them about our outcomes. So if you come to our lab, I think you will see maybe not all the fish in one time, but we study perch, walleye, rainbow trout, salmon, tilapia, and lake sturgeon. So depends on the objective of the project. So they could be nutrition, toxicology, or environmental study. Okay, so we are very fortunate. I think that we have a very good facility here. If you have never visit, you're welcome to visit us. I'll say that it's one of the best web lab in the region. So what we do and how our student learn here. So a lot. So we have to learn how to make a home for the fish. So you have to see how to learn how to build a system, the tank or the pipes, and how to make feed in the kitchen. So make sure the fish get the right diet, because this is very challenging protocol, different from chicken and cow or other land animals. So any feed in the water, if not stable, the nutrient will be leaching out, so become fertilizers that will contaminate our water. So this is very challenging technology. So, and then, of course, we have to learn how to take care of the fish, make sure the water is good for them, the diet, give to them timely, and how to collect sample to answer the question. And so we may have to take the liver, the bone, or the eye, or the heart, or brains too. And finally, so we need to know how to share our outcome to the public or the research society. So, as I mentioned before, we're very proud with our system, having this diverse system. We can raise fish from egg to the broodstock or the fork size. So, and especially yellow perch at the school, we have outline cycle spawning, which means we can have baby 4 times a year instead of once a year. So this is a very good research source. And also you can learn how to spawn the fish and raise them from egg to the reproduction and a different kind of system. Okay. And so our lab, our students have very diverse background. We have undergrad student, graduate student, postdoc, and international scientists. So for example, our undergrad student, currently we have 5 students here. They study different topics. You don't have to be aquaculture people. For example, Daniel is interested in marine science, the environmental science. So what his projects try to answer, how's the nutritional status of the walleye that could impact the fish, the tolerance to the environmental stress like hypoxia, temperature, or handling. So that's one of the projects he presented at the national conference recently. And then another student, his background is film and computer science. What he does in the lab, so what he tried to using his previous technology or the skill to help us to develop a film on the yellow perch. So we want to share the research outcome to our public by telling a story. So hopefully that we're not going to bore people, right? So, but in order to make a good film, he not only taking picture, he need to understand the whole process of the perch production from spawning, from like this egg ribbon, and how to produce diet, how to raise them, how to dissect them, how to go to the market, what's the challenging and what's the opportunity. So this is a very good education process. And then beside research, we do encourage our students have an active engagement with our public and outreach to our community. So we believe that only have a good supporting and also understanding from our public, then our research can go to the right shape and we can make it more meaningful. Okay, so and engage with the industry. Let's say if we have a result or some finding in the lab, we also need to test in the farm. For example, let's say we have a good diet, looks like work perfectly in the lab. Then we need to run another research in the farm to see how it's going on. So this is the perch farm. So we test our diet by our postdoc in the Puffed Fish, Washington. So I'm very proud with our training and our student. For example, one of our previous graduate student, Peter, and he graduated here in 2020, supposed to continue PhD in another country in Australia, but because of COVID, he could not go one there, and then he found out he started a farm years ago. So what he take out from the school here really prepare him very well, can be working independently. So that's made me very proud of them. So I think that's all a brief discussion, introduction and about my program. And now, so let me share with you some very preliminary study on the microplastic research. So we all know that microplastic, definition-wise, less than 5 millimeter. So it could be everywhere. I think I'm not going through this one. The first presentation have given you a very good background. Okay, so the microplastic can get into the fish through the surrounding environment, like water or the feed. So for us, because we are manipulating the feed, so am I interested in what happened if the microplastic contaminate the fish food? What's going to impact the fish? And what's the impact to our consumer? So in this study, we add the microplastic called high density polyethylene. This is very common plastic you see in the pipe, the plastic bag and bottle, right? So we add different level of the microplastic in the feed and feed to the fish about 4 to 30 milligram per 100 gram fish. So, and then after over 2 months, about 9 weeks, and then we look at the fish growth and the fish health, and then let's see how's impact. So, and then you see that we didn't see the growth change within the 9 weeks. However, so, and after we starving the fish, we didn't find any accumulation in the gut, also in the fish, so which is the good news. However, if we measure the nutritional content of the fish, you see the quality change. We see the protein decrease, and then some mineral content, the decreased as well, which means so the fish may have using the other nutrient like a protein or mineral to invest to excrete the microplastic. So, and if we look at the liver, we also find that the liver structural composition change. There are more glycogen, which more sugar accumulate into the liver, and the liver size larger. These have the plastic. This you don't have plastic, and then the size is much larger than the control. So that definitely changed the liver health. So with this study, I'm not going to go further. So we do estimate that the metabolism, the nutrient change. So like there's no free lunch. Normally we say that because when you're trying to excrete the microplastic, the fish has to do extra work. They have to pay for this extra work. So that's why maybe the nutritional content change, the metabolism change, and that's why they impact the fish health. So then another study is a tilapia. We know tilapia have different gut. The intestine much longer than the yellow perch. So we test similar diet, but different size of microplastic. Okay, and then we look at the same thing. We look at the gut microbiome, and we look at the liver metabolism and also the brain. And we do find that in the tilapia, we find that the brain, there's some gene, the expression related to circadian change, which means they have different, maybe a could affect the hormone because the circadian rhythms could be related to reproduction. So we can say that it might change the fish behavior, reproduction in the future. And then the liver and then the gut, let's see how the gut. So if we look at the accumulation, we find that the larger microplastic, they can be easy excrete out and then go to the feces, right? And then small one have less level in the feces. However, if you look at the gut, you see that the larger side have higher retention and in the intestine. So which means the size really change the efficiency of the fish that eject the microplastic. And so this is make more sense to us. It's different from perch because the perch, the gut is shorter, so it's easy to be empty, the toxicant or the microplastic. However, the tilapia, it could have 3 or 5 times longer gut than the yellow perch. So it takes longer time, and also the size is different too. So this just gives you some preliminary information that microplastic, yet they do impact the fish if the diet that contaminate with the plastic. And of course, this impact could be changed because the fish species and also the size of microplastic. And I'm very sure that different form or different type of plastic will change that too. So, but we need further study. So, and our goal is try to produce more nutritional and safety seafood for our public and for our consumer and also for our environment. So with that, I'll end up my discussion here, and I would like to thank you all the support from the different agents. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Deng. That was really fascinating. I have a lot of questions, but I want to see if any of our participants have questions. You're welcome to drop them in the chat or go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your questions out loud. Well, I'll jump in with a question while others are thinking about the questions that they want to ask. So Dr. Deng, do you see any potential for plastics in the Great Lakes to impact the ecosystem on a large scale? So if, yellow perch and tilapia in the lab are ingesting plastics, obviously that's because you're feeding it to them, you are. I've seen images of the zooplankton in the Great Lakes with plastics in their guts. So is that moving up the food chain? Do you anticipate seeing like actual impacts in the ecosystem as a whole, or do you have any thoughts on that?
I have to say the lab study could be very different from the ecosystem. I'm not sure I'm in a good position to answer your question, but I can discuss that one. I mean, for example, we know that a lot of wild caught fish, we see that about 60 to 70% of them, you have found the microplastic in the gut. So why we want to do the lab study, we want to answer some question, because in the wild caught fish, you really don't know when the fish have the plastic, right? So I would say that maybe certain size, the fish can still, like the perch, they can reject the microplastic. In our case, for example, but maybe it's too big, of course, they get stuck, blockage the gut. So that's a major impact for sure. And the smaller one maybe take longer time. So if you go to fishing, let's say you're going to eat the fish, definitely you like to clean the gut, remove the gut, or if you have a fish alive there, maybe you have to, or fish farming, you should stop feeding for a couple of days before go to the market. I think that's the outcome we like to suggest based on my study. The food web was, so yeah, if the clam and something, algae, wherever, they have this microplastic, they could go to the small fish and then accumulate it. And how they could accumulate in the muscle, I think the question is still still debating. Some scientists think that it's too big to go through the muscle. But from my part, I think they could impact the nutritional quality. I don't know the accumulation yet. It depends on which kind of plastic and how long they have been exposed. So maybe they damage the gut leaking. So we call gut leaking. That could go to the wherever other. So, but maybe the fish will die soon, so we may not able to find a live fish for fishing. So I don't know. So I say the nutritional quality is my concern as well, and fish health. Or maybe they could change the reproduction behavior, if similar to tilapia, for example.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for that. And yeah, there's a lot more research needed for sure. I could just see, like the nutritional availability in the Great Lakes starting to dissipate as, as more and more plastic enters the food chain. And, then maybe eventually the lower animals on the food chain have less and less nutritional value for the larger ones, or, if it is causing that actual like outright harm to their intestines or their livers or things like that, like there's just, I don't know how far away that scenario is or if it's, imminent, but I know we need a lot more research in that area. All right. Any other questions for Dr. Deng? Okay. Is there any effect on the skin or gills, which could be another way for penetration? So I think this is asking, can plastic get in through the gills? Can it get in through the skin? Is that another way that it can get into their systems, or is it more through what they're eating? And if I'm incorrect in my my reading of your question there, please feel free to add more information. Thanks for that question.
Yeah, so we didn't measure anything at the skin, the gill and skin, but well, it could block the gill, right? So if they attach it, that could impact the breathing part. For the skin, well, plastic is first the density, depends on the density because they're floating around. So it might be so, but that could be a very good question, but we didn't look at that. And so I don't know, but I think the gill is more makes sense to me too. Yeah.
Yeah, those microfibers are so tiny. They're like less than 2 microns, and they can, I would imagine that that's getting in through their gills and either getting stuck in their gills or getting into their lungs, just like it is with humans.
Yeah, if you're talking to the nano, even worse. So yeah, I think depends on the size and the type of the plastic.
Sure. Okay, so we got another question. How about the waste? Do you study that? And I know you measured plastic. Yeah.
Waste is the feces?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, the fish waste.
Yeah, we measured the fecal sample. Yes, they have microplastic in there, in the purge. So not in the gut, but in the tilapia, you see that in the feces, the larger one, the larger size end up in the feces. But then the small one have more in the retained into the gut. Yeah, and actually we have a study in the zebrafish, very small fish, and we see the very beautiful plastic in the feces.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, zebrafish are so tiny. I can imagine that their feces are very tiny too, and then to have plastic chunks come out in there, it must be alarming. And I'm so curious, and I'm sure the research isn't there yet, but what does that mean for humans, right? Like, are we excreting the plastic that we're eating, or is it sticking in our lungs? Is it in our livers? Like, what is it doing in our bodies? And that's something that, as far as I'm aware, that research isn't there yet, isn't answering those questions yet.
Yeah, the last point I'd like to share is the plastic could carry some nutrient out of your gut. So there might be another hypothesis we'd like to look into there, because in the wild, they carry some chemical, but when they're in our gut, let's say I add into the food, so when they eat it, so the purge work very hard to eject them, but they could carry some mineral or something, the nutrients just follow them out. So another way, indirectly, they reduce the absorption or digestion of the nutrient. That could another impact on the fish.
I hadn't heard of that one before. That's really interesting. That could have a big impact on health and nutrition too.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Deng. I really appreciate your time today, and we'll have more questions for you when we get to the end part.
Thank you.
So don't go anywhere quite yet, Dr. Deng. why I was smiling just a little bit, I happened to run into Dr. Guo in the hallway just upstairs, and we started having some of that discussion about what is microfiber and nanoplastics and stuff. What are some of those effects and looking at them. So we'll be excited to hear what Dr. Guo says as well. And I would like to introduce Dr. Guo. His major research focus is on aquatic biogeochemistry, with an emphasis on the role of natural organic matter in governing the fate and transport of legacy and emerging contaminants. He received his PhD in oceanography from Texas A&M University. After working as a postdoc and assistant research scientist there, Dr. Guo joined the University of Alaska Fairbanks in 2002 as a research professor in the International Arctic Research Center, and then the University of Southern Mississippi as a faculty member in the Department of Marine Sciences. Dr. Guo has been a professor in the School of Freshwater Sciences since 2012. So he's been doing lots of wonderful work for us. And I look forward to hearing about it a bit more, Dr. Guo.
Thank you, Liz, for your introduction. Okay, to save time, I don't have slide to introduce my research, but I'm going to just get into what I'm going to talk about, my research project on microplastic and nanoplastic. So these are we are working on a National Science Foundation funded research project. So right now we have Shima, a postdoc working in this project, and Mitch is a graduate student, and Sean Gibbs is the UWM's undergraduate student fellow.
And Dr. Guo, just so you know, right now the slide that we can see is what you generally teach at UWM.
Oh, really? So okay, so I'm showing. Sorry about that. I'm showing.
No, that's okay. I just wanted to make sure that that's what you actually wanted us to see at the moment.
No. I think something is wrong. Let me see.
There we go. That one now shows
okay.
current research projects in Dr. Guo's lab on microplastics.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah.
That's okay.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have a slide to introduce my research group, but if you are interested, then you could check my website at this address. So this is a NSF funded research project. So Shima, Mitch, and Sean right now are working on it. So we all know microplastic and nanoplastic are everywhere. So they are toxic and persistent in aquatic environment. Here examples from KK River. So I just took this photo outside of this building, and we also take this individual plastic that floating in the lower KK River, so you could see they contain different type of plastic. And so what we are doing is to focus on microfibers, because microfibers have been found to be the most abundant microplastic in the environment. So microfibers, for example, including nylon or polyester, acrylic, and of course cellulose. So in addition to a lot of thermoplastic, so these are different type of plastic for recycling simple, for example, PETH. High density polyethylene is probably PVC. You can miss something here. Low density polyethylene, polypropylene, polystyrene, and others. So that, our project is try to focus on less study and also the most abundant microfibers. So I show these examples of microplastic or plastic debris from the KK River. So our focus is on the less studied microfibers, which has been show to be the most abundant microplastic in the environment. So we are also try to focus on the invisible like nanoplastic, because nanoplastic has been reported to be more toxic compared to like microplastic, because they are capable of penetrate like a biological membrane and could accumulate in fish tissue. So when we eat fish, they could become part of our human tissue, and we don't know what kind of toxic or physiological effect. So, and what we try to do is to see if, or how like natural processes or during the degradation of microplastic or plastic debris, is that process like lead to the, what kind of degradation process, is that lead to completely degradation into dissolved molecular, or leading to the production of nanoplastic in natural environment. And we know plastic, or either microplastic or nanoplastic, contain either primary source or secondary sources. And secondary source is, for example, during the breaking down or the degradation. So big plastic becomes smaller plastic. So we are kind of interested to understand if the degradation through photochemical or UV irradiation could lead to the production of nanoplastic. And of course, we combine field studies and laboratory experiment. So here we have a little bit examples. We try to understand what kind of size distributions of microplastic in the KK River, or what kind of like major polymer compositions in this microplastic. And we try to understand in the laboratory the environmental fate of microplastic, for example, exposed to UV irradiation, and to see the yield of like plastic-derived dissolved organic material, and of course the specific degradation products. So what we do here, I'm not sure if you could see the whole screen, but this project is kind of like led by like Mitch, a graduate student. So we try to understand the, what kind of size distribution, in this microplastic, for example, from the KK River, and what kind of like polymers composition. We try to, this is ongoing project, try to use different kind of instrument to identify the specific polymer structure, so linking to like a type of plastic. And we collect some initial samples, as you can see, based on the mass of the suspended particles, and we are working on the characterization of microplastic. So we want to see, okay, what kind of size are the most abundant one in, for example, from the KK River. And the other thing we do is to understand, okay, different type of plastic, when they like either, after degradation, so what happened to those degraded products, or even the water soluble like material. And for example, we try to understand, okay, just because we got some like microplastic, and when we ditch with, we try to clean it with water before the degradation, but we find they contain significant amount of dissolved organic material. So we are kind of interested to understand what are these soluble, water soluble dissolved organic material from microplastic do. What happened when they are leaching out in like rivers or the Great Lake. So we ditch different type of, plastic, including microfibers. The red color one are microfiber, the blue color one are microplastic. And as you can see, microfibers produce, more amount of dissolved organic material compared to most of the thermoplastic. And so either in terms of chromophoric dissolved organic material, or in terms of bulk dissolved organic carbons, the DOC, okay, as you can see here. And we are kind of expose these water-soluble organic material to UV light. And as you can see here, as the degradation going on, these are kind of three-dimensional fluorescence. Basically, it's kind of fingerprinting. And as the initial water content at higher, the color is going to represent the organic material, like organic concentration or the density, fluorescence densities here. And as the degradation going on, as you can see, it's, majority of the initial organic material could be degraded from large and high density to here is very low density. And we use nylon and polystyrene or PETE and low molecular PVC. These are more contain some aromatic polymers in their structure, so they are likely to have higher photochemical reactivities. And we also check their degradation kinetic in terms of degradation rate constant. So we compare different plastic derived DOM, and we look at it, compare with the degradation rate constant. Higher degradation rate constant means they could be degraded much faster than the lower degraded constant. So except one exception, and majority of the degradation rate constants like CDOM means chromophoric DOM has higher degradation rate compared with the book DOM. And this makes sense because chromophoric DOM are those could absorb light and be degraded much faster than the book dissolved organic material. So the other project we are doing is looking at the environmental fate of the disposable face mask. And we know during the pandemic, billions of face masks has been used and eventually discarded. And of course, some ended up in landfill, but a lot of also ended up in the aquatic environment. For example, here, even in the coral reef environment, you could see a lot of disposable face masks. So we separate into outer layer, middle layer, and inner layer, because middle layer contain, the majority, the important plastic polymers we use for these masks are polypropylene. So we divide into 3 layers and then expose to the UV light and to see what kind of degradation products they have and how fast and how slow they could be degraded. Yeah. So we also take some pictures just before and after the degradation. Then as you could see, for example, the outer layer, and before the degradation, you see it's kind of a lot of fiber material. Then after the degradation, they become a much some chunk of stuff instead of a lot of also fine fibers. So before and after the degradation. And of course, we also use the 3-dimensional fluorescence technique, try to understand how fast or how slow they degrade. As you could see here, actually we see a lot of during the photochemical degradation of these face masks and polypropylene, and we see a considerable production of organic material. Means these face masks also release huge amount of dissolved organic material. So the next thing to do is we collect these face mask degraded organic material and just to look at it, what happened. Did they hanging around in the water garden for a long period of time, or they could also be degraded very fast or something like that. So here is the other example. We do the photochemical weathering of microfibers, and we are looking at the production of dissolved organic material from different types of microfibers. And as you could see here, these are, we compare with dark incubation and light incubation. and also the bulk DOM and the chromophoric DOM, as you can see, compared with the dark incubation, like photochemical degradation of these microfibers, all release significant amount of dissolved organic material. So of course, we do a kind of kinetic experiment and look specifically at the production rate. And we also characterize what kind of like these produced like degraded dissolved organic material are. So using the like 3-dimensional fluorescence technique. And as you could see in the beginning, we hardly see anything. So as degradation going on, then we could see a kind of accumulation of different like organic polymers compared with the dark incubation. And this is polyesters. So the other example is from 0.05 millimeter like acrylic microfibers and show the same thing as huge production of dissolved organic material compared with the dark incubation. Anyway, I mean, we are kind of, these are ongoing projects. So what we try to do is also how like micro and nanoplastic could serve as a transporter of other organic contaminant in the environment. And of course, a lot of toxicity study, actually, they use, for example, is pristine products, pristine microplastic, or is kind of weathered plastic, microplastic collect from the environment. Their toxicity could be very different when we do the toxicity study. And the other thing is how natural organic material could mitigate the toxicity of like micro or nanoplastic. Because in the nature, there are tons of natural organic material. Look at the MKE River, the water are so turbid and sometimes it's brown in color. So that will code it like a natural, the microplastic or nanoplastic, making their toxicity very different if you just use pristine like microplastic for toxicity experiment. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Guo. This is really interesting, and I'm so fascinated to hear all of this. We're about ready to jump into Milwaukee Riverkeeper's 28th annual spring cleanup, in which we pick up 150,000 pounds of trash to keep it from going into our rivers and Great Lakes, so that it doesn't break down into these nanoplastics. And I just keep seeing all these different connections about how important it is to keep trash, most of which is plastic, out of the environment. Because what I'm hearing you say, Dr. Guo, is that like these plastics, they're breaking down, you know, from a plastic water bottle or a face mask or whatever is getting into the environment, you know, through the sunlight, through wind and wave action, it's breaking down into microplastics and continuing to break down into nanoplastics, which, as you mentioned, are far more harmful because they can get into our systems easier. They're in our drinking water and our food, as we've talked about. So, have you seen any evidence of plastics continuing to break down after that point? You know, like they're turning into nanoplastics. Are they just becoming like smaller and smaller nanoplastics? Is there, I know there's always hope for, you know, we talk about like biodegradable plastics, right? Like totally degrading. But it's my understanding that they will remain nanoplastics forever. Is that correct? Is that what you're finding?
Actually, we haven't really confirmed the production of nanoplastic in the field or in aquatic environment because of the difficulty in sampling. So right now we are doing, for example, we expose the microplastic to UV irradiation, and we now collecting those like degradation products. Try to quantify, of course, we already quantify or characterize the dissolved organic material, but we want to use different analytical instrument to see if these like less than 1 micron or less than 0.45 micrometer like organic material still, contain polymers structure. And if we could show that, and that means they are really nanoplastic. But if they do not carry the polymer, their parents or inherited like plastic polymer, then means they are actually dissolved molecular and maybe not a big concern, for example, through the photochemical degradation of microplastic. So we are collecting the sample and is waiting for detailed analysis to confirm if these degradation products actually contain nanoplastic.
Okay, so we're gonna have to have you back on in a few years and we'll get a follow-up. I'll be eagerly awaiting the results of your research.
No, if we find this, then it could be because so far actually none report showing the presence of nanoplastic in natural environment due to the sampling difficulties. As you could see, micro is okay, but nano is invisible. So even under electron microscope, we could still, hardly see the nanoplastic. So that is the challenging thing. And some, of course, a few report, but they all turn to be kind of false because they collect, for example, 2 liters of water from the Atlantic Ocean, and they report, say, oh, they find nanoplastic. And they say, if you times the volume of global ocean, then the total mass of plastic will be higher than the total plastic we produce during the human history, maybe 100 million times of higher. So it's impossible.
That's so interesting. Oh my goodness. All right. I kind of have some just more general questions about the Great Lakes and plastics and just the research that both of you are working on, or other folks at SFS, or if there's other research happening around the Great Lakes. So it's about 6:40, so we've got about 15 minutes to just kind of ask some of these broader questions. Oh, I'm seeing a question coming in. Okay, so are there any filters that are being researched that can filter out micro or nanoplastics from the water before they enter organisms? And what about any possible enzymes like hydrolase that can help break down plastic? That's a fabulous question, Umair. Dr. Guo, any thoughts on that? Or Dr.
We
Jen?
have the capability to isolate either nanoplastic down to 1 nanometer size. Yeah. Then of course, we are now only looking at photochemical reactivities. So the other portion is the biological degradation. So some other, because I'm not a biologist, I'm a chemist, so I only looking at photochemical degradation. So other research group, they are looking at the microbial degradation. Of course, enzyme then will play an important role to degrade it like a different type of plastic. So yeah, I haven't really checked the literature.
We'll have to get some more folks in here. I learned today, and this is really interesting, mealworms can eat styrofoam. I don't know what the impacts of that are. Like, are the mealworms healthy? Do they go through their metamorphosis? Do they just die because all they ate was styrofoam? I don't know, but I heard that was an interesting thing that I learned today, that mealworms will eat styrofoam, which is one of the hardest types of plastic for us to get rid of, because it can be recycled, but you lose money in trying to recycle styrofoam versus just making new stuff. So there's so much to learn about plastics and how they interact in our environment and how we can work to get rid of them. So I guess that ties into one of my questions for both of you is just what other areas of research are you aware of that are happening related to plastics and the Great Lakes region, or even just other exciting fields of plastic research that you're aware of?
I know USGS funded by MMSD is doing a lot of work on looking at the sources of microplastic and what major type of polymers in the Milwaukee River and the coastal Lake Michigan, probably. Other than that, I'm not sure. Other a few programs going on, maybe other laboratory study understanding their toxicity or degradation. And I'm not really clear.
That sounds like a really important study too. I'll have to look into that more. And I believe I know MMSD helps support plastic-free MKE and the work that we do. So I bet they can connect us with those folks and we can learn more over there. Dr. Deng, anything that you've heard of that you're interested in learning more about or seeing the results of regarding plastic research?
Well, I'm the food people. I like to eat. So not only the region, I think national wise. So more people are looking for the seafood safety. So I think that could be the issue. So but I don't know people in the region, but other international people look at the how this contaminant is going to change the consumers' attitude to the seafood, and how the producer and the food processor, because microplastic can come to the seafood. During processing, during transportation, or making feed, you use plastic bag, you wrap it up the fish, so any step can jeopardize the process. So that's one of the major concerns about the seafood issue. And the water and the pipes. And let's talk about cage culture in the ocean or in the lake. So you're using net, and all this is related to plastic. So it's so hard for fish to live in a microplastic-free world. So we need to have a better understanding how this is going to impact them, and which kind of material is relatively safe to them, and how we should avoid during the processing of the product before going to the market. I think that might be very interesting and important to me. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Your audio was breaking up a little bit there, so I'm just going to try and summarize in case anyone was having a hard time hearing. But what I heard was, the fish that we're eating can be impacted by plastics at several different steps along the way, right? So like in the water, like what they're eating, but then also the packaging and the processing of the fish that we're eating as well. And I know that toxins can come out of the packaging that our food and beverages are in and get into what we're eating. And so that's probably happening with fish as well. And that it'll just be really important to continue to look at how that's impacting our fish. And I really liked what you mentioned, Dr. Deng, about thinking about consumers' attitudes towards fish. Are we going to continue to eat fish?
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead.
To eat fish, so it doesn't mean that you cannot eat fish. But other animals could expose to plastic too, right? Mm-hmm. So we just want to make sure we have enough information to have a better understanding of the understanding of the topic, and then have a better management. So it doesn't mean we cannot eat fish. For my part, I still think it is safe, but it depends how they have been processed, how they have been cultured, and we're monitoring them. So yeah, okay. So they don't take me long that we cannot eat fish. That I lose my job.
Yes, no, we should definitely still eat fish. Fish are a critical source of protein for millions of people around the world, and we're definitely not to that point yet where they're not safe to eat. But I could see a point where people are hearing that there's more plastic in the ocean than fish by 2050. And what is that doing to our attitudes about what we're eating and what we're doing? And I would much rather us see just reducing our plastic consumption versus stopping to eat fish. But we'll see.
Agriculture, irrigation, it's the water, they plastic. So we plant the soybean, and all these could have plastic too. So
absolutely,
to get plastics not necessary only from the water. You could from the ingredient you produce in the land. So everyone connect to each other. So it's a networking.
Yeah, that's something that we don't hear talked about a lot. We do talk a lot about how much plastic is in the ocean, but we don't talk about the fact that the water that we're irrigating all of the other crops that we eat have plastic in it. And is that getting taken up by the plants that we're eating and the plants that we're feeding to the other animals that we eat? It's a whole system, and it's a whole food chain, and it's all of it's got plastic in it. I will say one of the things that we did reach out to Milwaukee Waterworks a while back to just kind of confirm, what they're able to take out of our drinking water. And they're able to filter out the nanoplastics down to, I think, 2 microns. So they can't get it all. They're getting as much as they possibly can out of our drinking water, but you know, those nanofibers are teeny tiny, and they are getting through into our drinking water somewhat. So you know, it is everywhere, and we do need to work on ways to just reducing the amount that's getting into the environment in the first place. So yeah. Liz, I had a question for you. Oh, forgot what it was for a second. Are you aware of other research projects happening with grad students in other labs, or researchers in other labs going on SFS that might be related to plastics or kind of tie into the conversations that we've been having today?
The the work of but there are actually a number of them. As you can imagine, there are lots of related plastic in the environment, so it touches a lot of different places. One of our people who are also doing work in addition to Dr. Deng and Dr. Guo is Dr. Rebecca Clapper, our current interim dean. And she is doing a lot of work with those nanomaterials and looking at their effects as they move through the system. And a project that, you know, we're both working on, Leah, when we were doing a large scale beach cleanup with a group called Milwaukee Water Investigators. And the plastics that are pulled together during that time, Dr. Michael Carvan is going to use those to do, to just kind of analyze and look at some of their, some of what the students, the middle school students who will be gathering all of that information, he's kind of using kind of their manpower to, or woman power to go and gather that data for him. So, you know, it's a prevalent enough topic that it does touch on a couple different researchers' activities. So yeah.
That's great. We're so excited to see it. This is, you know, it's like I've been saying, it's something that we just need so much more information on. There's just not enough of it out there for us to make good decisions. And I guess that's my next question for Dr. Deng and Dr. Guo is, do you see any policy implications from either what you're currently finding or what you would want to continue to study in the future? You know, is this something that we can take to our legislators, either at a state level or national level, or to say like, here, look, this is what we're finding, and we need to change policies based on this information?
Okay, so I'm not sure. My study is very preliminary, so I'm not sure can bring up to the level. But from what I can see is that, for example, for the farming, as the fish going to sell their fish, I would suggest them have some starvation time, like a suggestion, maybe withdraw from the food. Make sure the water, you know, clean water. If you're using recirculating aquaculture systems, even you have to be very careful because everything just keep recirculating inside the system. So I would purge the fish, you know, so maybe let them starving for a couple of days, empty the gut. I think that is a very safe way, easy way to do. I'm not sure it's go to the policy, but should be go to the recommendation of the food production. And so that's what I can think about that. And for the ingredient monitoring might be another issue, but we don't have enough data to go to the recommendation, but we need to have more research about how to monitoring ingredient production. I mean, we have to avoid from the beginning. So that's what I can think about now.
Yeah, those are two really good points. That could be really, really good guidance to give aquaculture farms and things, you know, just make sure that they're filtering the water as best they can to keep that plastic out of that recirculating system, and checking, you know, and making sure that the food is analyzed to see how much plastic is in there. And I really like that suggestion of not feeding the fish for 2 days before they're harvested to go to us. And that just reduces the amount of plastic that's in their system that then might be, that move up the food chain into us. Yeah, thank you for that. Dr. Guo?
I'm not really familiar with policy part, but I feel, education is very important. If everyone know, how to proper dispose plastic, and as you can see, when you dry, plastic is everywhere. So bottles, plastic bag hanging out there, then that is the killing part. So if people all, so every citizen know how we should properly recycle and properly dispose, and that will have less problems.
Yeah, that's great. And I think this, your type of research can help us really, make that case from a different angle, right? So that's all plastic free is all about, educating people and helping people understand, like we really do need to reduce our plastic consumption because it's everywhere and it's getting into our food and it's breaking down and getting into our water, and all of these things are really helpful.
Even the biodegradable plastic, and they are, they take a few years or a certain time period, and if you is not is not properly disposed, then they still produce something become microplastic, become nanoplastic, then polluting the environment.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I know so many folks that we talk to get really excited about oh, it's compostable or it's biodegradable plastic. It's totally fine. And,
No,
we take time. You're doing in others,
take time to degrade it. Yeah.
It's still in the environment. It's still causing some of the same problems. Fabulous. So Dr. Guo, I have a question in the chat asking if you are able to share the PDFs of your slides at some point. And if that's something that you're comfortable doing, you can email it to Liz and Liz can get it to me and we'll send it out to everyone who was on the call if that's something that you're comfortable with.
Yeah, okay. I will maybe finalize a mini PowerPoint or something. Yes.
That would be great. Thank you. And Dr. Deng too, if there's anything that you want to share with the group after today's presentation, feel free to send that our way and we'll make sure that folks get that. Liz did include the links to the websites for both of our presenters today in the chat. And so we'll make sure that we capture those links and send them out in an email again afterwards so that you are able to look at those later. We've got about 5 minutes left, so I do want to wrap up quickly. And Liz, my final question is for you. We talked about visiting SFS and seeing some of this research that's happening firsthand. So do you have any upcoming opportunities, or what's the best way for folks to come and actually talk to you and tour the building and see these labs in action?
So we can regularly on the third Thursday of the month at 12:30. I provide tours for the general public. There's just a website, a web form that you can fill out, which I'll throw in our chat. So you can do it that way. If we have enough people who are really interested, we could certainly set up an individual, we figure out a time for plastic-free MKE and set it up so that you guys can just come and can visit when it works a little better for you. Because I know many people, it's not conducive to come see our school at 12:30 on a Thursday. So or you can do both. That works too. But that's a way that we can connect with all of you a little easier. And so that will be happening. And then we also always do one of the best ways to really see the students, and both Dr. Deng and Dr. Guo have wonderful students who work in their labs who are working on outreach and connecting and talking to the community, as well as many of our other labs do. And we have everyone kind of put on their best and do a big open house for the Harbor Fest event and Doors Open Milwaukee, which is ways off right now, but it's September 24th. It's a wonderful event. So there's a street festival in front of the building. We do an open house where you can come right in and see what we've got going on. River Edge Nature Center releases their sturgeon that they rear all year long. And then Milwaukee Riverkeeper does a wonderful boat parade and an art project. They design or decorate, different groups decorate these boats. They're just beautiful. And so they do a boat parade. So that's a really great way to, to connect and see that stuff. But tours are wonderful because then you get in-depth information as well. So I'm putting the tour in.
Thanks, Liz. I really appreciate that. We should consider doing a plastic-free tour. Didn't even cross my mind until now. So we'll think about setting that up. So this is why we do these. So if any of you on the call tonight are interested in that, please make sure you let us know. And then if we get interest, we'll make sure to set that up with Liz in the coming months. And thanks for the plug on the boat parade. If you have not been to HarborFest yet, oh my goodness, we're going on like our 4th year, I think, of collaborating with SFS and Doors Open and River Edge Nature Center. You get to name a baby sturgeon and put it into the water. It's amazing. And our boat parade, it is just the best event. So we hope to see you down in the harbor on September 24th. And so we also have some of our other graduate students at SFS in the call today. So thanks so much for being here, Lisette. She is working on nanotoxicology and looking at the impacts of polystyrene nanoplastics. I just scrolled and I lost my place. Nanoplastics on rainbow trout gill cells at the molecular level. So I'm really fascinated to learn more about what you're working on too and what you're finding. So please keep us in the loop with where your research is. Same goes for anyone on the call. I know we have some other students and on the call as well. So please keep us in the loop with what's going on in your world and what we can share with our the plastic-free MKE audience, because people are very fascinated by all the research that you all are doing. So we're coming up on 7 o'clock. I'm just going to put a plug in here as well for the Milwaukee Riverkeeper annual spring cleanup. As I mentioned, it's our 28th cleanup. We're going to have about 4,000 volunteers all over the basin. There's 98 sites, I believe, that are available, including the School of Freshwater Sciences. Student Water Council hosts a site every year, so you can sign up through that. But please help us if you have a chance on April 22nd, spend a few hours helping us pick up some of that trash and keeping it out of the rivers and the lake. We're going to pick up 150,000 pounds of trash again this year between our cleanup and our Adopt a River program. And as we're learning, that's pretty impactful to keep that out of our ecosystem. So I'm getting some great thank yous in the chat. So Dr. Deng and Dr. Guo, if you're not reading these, everyone's really appreciative of the information that you've shared. And we really appreciate your time here today. You're doing such great research, and it's really great to hear what's happening and to see what's going on out there so that we can keep in touch and share that information out with the public. So thank you again so much for your time tonight.
Thank you
for your organization.
Appreciate that. Thank you for your time.
All right, and thanks everyone for being here. We'll send out follow-up with the recording and some links in the next week as we pull all that information together for you. So, and thanks Liz for helping us set this up. This was really great. We're so excited to hear about everything that's going on at SFS.
Absolutely.
All right, have a great night, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good night. Yeah. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.